Hello, my name is Noha Alaa. My story is He bent over the king's clothes, kissed it, and disappeared. From Yusuf Idris's book, Spirits and Ghosts. An hour passed. The King George II is still talking to his men. He used to move back and forth in the grand hall without stopping, and he ordered his men to remain seated. It is said that Napoleon inherited this uncomfortable habit from him. It rarely happens that a chief aide camp enters to announce unusual something. The king doesn't like to be interrupted for any reason, but this time something urgent has happened. The chief aide camp entered and asked the king for permission to deliver an important letter to one of his men. The king gestured with some disinterest from him to do it quickly. The chief aide camp approached Mr. Harris and gave him the letter. Mr. Harris asked for permission to open the letter outside the hall, but the king gestured to him to open it in front of him, and he did. His face changed, and the king realized that matter was serious. He gestured for him to leave. He asked for permission to be absent for 3 or 4 weeks, and the king agreed. Mr. Harris left and returned to his home. It was Mr. Harris' habit to leave some servants at his country mansion. As for the family and the other servants, they are moving with him to London, but it seemed necessary for him to return immediately to the country mansion as the matter was serious. The letter he received mentioned that, "Come quickly, sir, the gold items left by your dear father have been stolen, and the silver items left by your beloved grandfather have also been stolen, and we are sorry for what happened, but your persons will eliminate the trust and we will identify the guilty party." King George asked, "Will you return to the countryside?" He replied, "Yes, my lord, if you would permit." The king, "Isn't it an adventure?" Mr. Harris, "Sorry, my lord." The king, "Or is it a way to stay away from your wife for a few weeks?" Mr. Harris, "Pardon me, my lord." King, "Then shall I send one of my men with you to assist you?" Mr. Harris, "This is your generosity, my lord." The king, "How many weeks will be enough to regain what you have lost?" Mr. Harris, "A few weeks, my lord." The king, "I think 4 weeks will be enough." Mr. Harris, "More than enough, my lord." He thanked the king and then left. This letter was written by the overseer of his country mansion. As soon as he saw his sire, he said to him, "This is a disgrace that has personally affected him, because he locks the doors and windows every night very securely, and he doesn't know how all of this happened in such a short time." The country mansion had a chef, 3 servants, and 2 maids. Mr. Harris asked him, "How did that happen?" The house overseer said that one night, when he went to bed and the weather was cold and windy, he heard sounds in the room below him. He was amazed at how these sounds were coming from below, as no one could have woken up. He is sure that everyone is asleep, but these sounds made him doubt the matter. He got dressed, went down the stairs, approached the room, and listened to whispered voices. So he couldn't make out of the voices clearly, but what was clear was the sound of the silverware coming out of the boxes and dangling in other boxes. He tried to get closer to the door, hoping to hear the sound of the servants who had managed to sneak into the room during the night. "Mr. Harris, why don't you wake up the maids and go to the police?" The overseer, "I had this idea, but I was afraid the thieves might come out, assault the girls, and escape." Mr. Harris, "Then why didn't you wake up the servants and the chef to help you catch the thieves?" The overseer, "I thought it was the servants and the chef who had sneaked into the silver and goldware cabinets." The overseer resumed his story and said, "I approached the door. The whispering was still going on, and with my sword in my hand I rushed to open the door." Mr. Harris, "Who did you find?" The overseer, "The thin young man and 2 others." Mr. Harris, "Who is this thin young man?" He answered, "He is a young man we hired recently. He comes from a poor family, but his father is a good man, and he raised him well." No sooner had this overseer opened the room than they attacked him, tied him to the chairs, gagged him, and fled. Mr. Harris went to the other servants and asked them what had happened. One replied he should resign, and so should his colleagues. They have been working for Mr. Harris for 10 years and have never been accused of this grave insult. Mr. Harris apologized to them for what had happened and explained that the accusation was unintentional. And the overseer was confused and didn't know exactly what to do. He is an older man and like a father to everyone. The servant said they used to get up at 6 a.m., prepare breakfast for 6:45, and have the overseer come down for breakfast at 5 minutes to 7. But that day he didn't come on time, and everyone was joking about it, saying that the blanket must be heavy or the drink was too strong, or the overseer was sick, or that something unusual had happened to him. They discussed among themselves who should go and wake him up. The servants suggested that one of the maids go and knock on his door to ask him what time it was. His maid went and knocked on the door once, twice, and 3 times, but the overseer didn't answer, so she quickly returned to tell them. They all approached the door and opened it forcefully. They didn't find the overseer, so his place on the bed was empty. He must have been there, but for some reason they couldn't find him. They went to the room of the thin young Henry, but they didn't find him in his bed. They realized that the two had gone out of an early morning walk or had gone to the cowshed. They hurried to the barn but found no one there. They thought of going to the silverware room, and there they found the overseer tied with ropes to the set. They put a cloth in his mouth to prevent him from screaming, united the ropes, took the overseer off the seat, and began massaging his body. But young Henry has completely disappeared. The servants insisted on resigning after this grave insult. He tried to appease them and succeeded in claiming them down. He added £2 to each of their salaries, and they reluctantly agreed. Mr. Harris called the police and they examined everything, counting the stolen items, which were a lot. Among them were solid gold candlesticks and gifted to the Harris family by kings and princesses, as well as gifts from senior bishops and valuable paintings. Months passed, but the police couldn't find anything. It was not difficult for Mr. Harris to realize that there was no hope and that what was lost was gone for good. The police failed to find young Henry. No one could believe the shock, the deep sadness, and the shame felt by his father. He couldn't imagine that his son could steal or be involved in theft with others. A year passed. During one of King George II's sessions in April 1733, the king said to Mr. Harris, "I have a strange feeling that you will find you're missing." The king then said, "Didn't you ask me how I know that?" King George II told that he dreamed of a large bird landing on the ground, carrying a golden candlestick. When he threw the candlestick over Mr. Harris's country mansion, it broke. The family and the household tried to find the candlestick, but they couldn't find it. The king said, "There have been few times when I have dreamed of things that have come true." Mr. Harris traveled on his annual holiday to his country mansion with all the servants and his family. Mr. Harris asked the overseer to show him how to secure the mansion and how to lock the doors and windows. Mr. Harris was surprised to see the overseer locking everything both inside and out. He locks the doors and windows, even the internal room doors, and does it all himself. No one is allowed to move in any room other than their own. If he tries, he can't. All the rooms are locked, and the keys are in the overseer's pocket. He is the one who opens the door of this mansion every day. When Mr. Harris went to his wife, he said, "What is that the overseer of our mansion is doing?" The wife asked, "What is he doing?" Mr. Harris said, He is locking the doors, and soon he will be locking our mouths too." The wife laughed and said, "But my dear, he has been doing it for 30 years." "Mr. Harris, I didn't know that." The wife, "What do you know around here?" Mr. Harris went back to bed, thinking about this mansion whose doors and windows had been locked for 30 years, and yet thieves had still managed to sneak it. Just as he reached out to extinguish the candle, he saw a thin young man enter his room without hearing the door open. Mr. Harris shuddered, but the thin young man stood motionless. The young man pointed to his mouth, indicating that he couldn't speak, and gestured for Mr. Harris to follow him. Mr. Harris got out of bed and quickly drew a sword, and the young man opened the door to the room, which had been locked with a key. He stepped out, with Mr. Harris following behind. Despite his intense fear, he couldn't help but notice that the young man walking silently ahead of him made no sound at all, as if he weren't touching the ground, as if he were a ghost or a spirit. But after a few moments, Mr. Harris began to feel an overwhelming sense of calm. The young man had already left the mansion and was heading into the garden, with Mr. Harris following behind. He walked toward a large oak tree standing in the garden. When he reached it, he pointed silently at the tree. Mr. Harris stepped closer and looked down the ground, but when he turned to speak to the young man, he had vanished. Mr. Harris returned to the mansion and woke the servants. He asked them not to make any noise so as not to wake his wife and the children. They walked to the oak tree. At Mr. Harris's request, they began to dig. First, they found a jacket buried in the soil. Then, moments later, they uncovered a corpse. The servants cried out in shock. "That is the thin young man, Henry." In May 1723, the overseer of the mansion admitted the trust. He had agreed with two thieves to steal silver and gold items, sell them, and send his share with the thin young man, Henry. It seems the thieves quarreled among themselves, and fearing that the thin young man would expose them, they killed and buried him. The London court sentenced the overseer to death by hanging, and he was executed. It seems the thin young man returned to take his revenge. After the overseer's execution, the thin young man was never seen again. King George II summoned Mr. Harris 1 week after the execution of the overseer. The summon was in the early hours of the morning. When Mr. Harris arrived at the King George II's palace, he found instructions requiring him to enter the king's bedroom. He entered the king's bedroom, and no sooner had the king seen him than he said, "Do you know a young man, 23 years old, tall and thin? His right eye is slightly smaller than his left. When he walks, he places one hand on his stomach, as if suffering from a stomachache, and he leans forward slightly as he moves." Mr. Harris said, "I saw him, my lord. He was the one they killed in my house when the thieves quarreled." The king strained in his seat and said, "Now I can sleep." A few days later, King George II told his men what had happened to him that night. He woke up to the sound of the door opening. When he peeked out from under the covers, he saw the young man. When he asked him, he didn't say a word. As the king saw his calmness and gentleness, he didn't want to shout at him or call the guards in the night. All that happened was that the young man approached the king's blanket and bent down to kiss it in gratitude. This is the same young man, Henry, who came to thank the king for the execution of the palace overseer. He disappeared, and no one saw or heard from him again after that.